It's one word or two words, money and power. Now, when you're talking about, most of us think, gee, money, do I have enough money to put my kids through college? These guys are, that's not the issue. It's massive macroeconomic geopolitical power.
Dr. Stephen Greer has fearlessly peeled back layers upon layers of deception, exposing the puppet masters, orchestrating the grand scheme. Get ready to have your mind blown as he uncovers the shocking truth behind all of this.
So when you're looking at these interests that want to maintain the status quo of the world financial, macroeconomic, and energy system, they will do almost anything to maintain that, even if it kills the planet, keeps, right now there's 3 billion souls on the planet that don't have any way to cook their food. They're chopping down rainforests and shrub in the desert in Africa. They don't have any electricity or gas.
Yeah.
3 billion. This just came out in The Economist, a mainstream economic journal. So how do we, and that of course builds into the extreme poverty. It leads to radicalization, terrorists, resentment of the West. I mean, there are huge implications for this mistake that was made almost a century ago. Now, and this is known by a number of people, what a huge mistake this is. So when you're talking about the motivation here, I mean, people have killed for a lot more than $900 trillion, and the level of corruption is worrisome. Now, in '92, General Albert Stubblebine III, Bert, who had been head of special forces and Army intelligence at Fort Huachuca, he intercepted me after we had this major contact event out in Florida and near Pensacola. And he subsequently, about a month later, personally offered me $2 billion to not pursue what I was doing and become part of his team.
$2 billion.
With a B, in '92. And I thought it was a joke, and it wasn't. And he described to me a sort of a black fund that they had gotten from the collapse of the Soviet Union in Eastern Europe, and that I would have complete access and control over it. But I have to be on their sort of team. They were trying to neutralize what I was doing. And as many people know, the CIA and some of those organizations have remote viewers who use consciousness to see remote places in the future.
Yeah, they've done studies with the Monroe Institute.
Oh yeah, I knew Bob Monroe, all those guys. And Ingo Swann was a friend of mine, all these guys. But so they knew what kind of trouble I could make. So people have to also get their mind around the kind of just sheer, bribery, corruption that happens on top of threats, Oppo research. They'll make up deep fake photos and videos to defame you. I've been called everything you can meet. And then they try to buy you off, and if they have to, they'll try to kill you. If you're doing things at this level, I've been like such a troublemaker for them.
I mean, I think it's not so hard to believe anymore,
Well, anyone who's done your work can see the kind of things that could happen.
I can see it, but I think a lot of the U.S. population can't see it. Unfortunately, I think unfortunately, but fortunately, the Epstein trials, and then everything that happened around that, it's, the judge there was a assassination attempt on the judge. Epstein didn't kill himself, all these things, and so it's becoming more, I hate to say
accepted.
Yeah, I hate to say accepted, but it's out there, and it's becoming more and more and more common.
Well, and I think that, so imagine the stakes of something like you just mentioned, which I had no knowledge of, and it's just whatever, people are weird. Imagine something a millionfold in terms of its implications for the stakeholders who want to maintain their hegemony and control of the global military, industrial, financial sector. That's the level we're talking about. We're not talking about the boots on the ground, the guys who are the colonels who manage. I just brought a lieutenant colonel to D.C. who had been involved with these projects. And he had been watching what I'd been doing for 20 years and was waiting for this law to pass. So what I'm saying is that we really need to have people come forward now. I'm actually begging people. We worked so hard to get it to this point, and it really is. I know that most people who have come forward, they were involved for a brief period of time, or they were in an office here, or at a skiff there, or at a military facility, or a corporate research project, and they don't know necessarily this whole picture. And so they're not culpable. They're not guilty of having done anything improper. They were doing as they were told. And they thought it was all being run properly, legally. It wasn't.
Yeah.
So they were used. And I think that that's very important. And so they have no liability. And now they're protected by the law, and they're protected, if we have to, tactically for security, which I have. But I think at this point that sort of thing, it can't happen because the profile on this is so high. I have a bunch of celebrities who like what we're doing. Something like that happens that I know about in my team, there would be 1 billion people who know about it.
You want to talk a little bit about the suppression of all this stuff in Project Mockingbird? Mm-hmm. Can you go into that?
Well, Mockingbird was one project, but it's an ongoing process that started really in full bore in the 50s. And that was to have major media people who were dual agents. They were in the media, but they were also on the payroll of the agency, the CIA, or others, and I have a document we published from I believe it was 92, where it says, it's a CIA document, we have people in every major news organization, it says it flat out, that are there to control, stop, alter stories at our request. So here's, I mentioned one myth, and that is that we have a free market and a free economy. We don't. It's managed. Because there's no way we have a free market economy when the most important sciences and technologies of the last 100 years have been ruthlessly suppressed. But the other myth that Americans buy into is that we have a free press and the fourth estate, as it's called, a check and balance against excesses. But the major media, and also now the major tech companies, are actually actively involved in suppressing the story or spinning it. Now, what do I mean? When you see people on CNN or CBS 60 Minutes, the folks that they will allow to talk about it are people that have been cherry-picked by this cabal, this secret government group, to say what they're told to say. It's scripted.
Do you have any examples of this?
Yes, of course. Nick Pope, Lou Elizondo, Chris Mellon, all those guys.
Okay.
And they have been, I know for a fact, been told what to say. And so they say, number one, first big lie, these are a threat to the national security, inferring that from outer space there's a threat. It's not true. Civilizations that are hundreds of thousands to millions of years more advanced than we are, if they were a threat, we'd be a charcoal floating through space about 1945 August with the atomic bomb. Number two, we'll get to that in a moment. Number two, they will say that we don't know what these are. Maybe they're from China. Maybe and even senior members of the Senate intelligence community have said that. We don't know. Because some of those guys have gone up there and whispered in their ear all this disinformation and spin. I know who they are. When in reality, we know what they are, where they come from, which ones are man-made and which ones are extraterrestrial. We absolutely have that data. But see, someone like myself saying that's going to get cut out of any show. For example, I was on a show, it had 22 million people listening live back some years ago. And I started talking about some of the senior membership of this committee that's running this covert program. And I got to one name. I talked about Admiral Bobby Ray Inman. He's been involved for decades with this. And then he went to the Board of Science Applications International Corporation, SAIC. It's one of the crown jewels of contracting on these exotic propulsion and energy systems. And then I think it was during the election, the second election for W, I mentioned that one of the most senior people is Dick Cheney. And we went to an unscheduled commercial break. A voice broke in, and the host had no idea. And it said, Dr. Greer, change the direction of this conversation now, or we will dump this show live. I said, with 22 million people listening? He says, yes. Don't talk about this. And the host was so sad. And the host to this day will say, "Oh, we can talk about anything." It's like when Joe Rogan says, "Oh yes, I can talk about free speech." To make his deal with Spotify, the show I did with Joe Rogan, forcibly by the corporate entity, had to be taken out. It is not in the lineup. You have to find it elsewhere. So anyone who thinks that the media doesn't purge whistleblowers of someone of what we're doing is naive. So Mockingbird, there have been a lot of code names for this, but we have a Air Force Intelligence, AFOSI guy that I have on tape. And it's in the unacknowledged documentary. People should look at it. It's for free. You can see it for free on all these sites. He was at Kirkland Air Force Base, and he admitted, and I'm quoting, taking bags of cash to people both in the local and national media, reporters, to secure their cooperation with telling stories or altering or putting a spin on them. So that corruption and rot reaches very firmly into the fourth estate and now big tech. And where it's been proven now through files released that people are shadow banned, algorithms are changed. We had a whistleblower that we put his interview, he was willing to do it posthumously. So I did the interview with him, he died, his wife sent me his death certificate, and then I uploaded it on our YouTube channel, which I have, you can go to it. And his name was Pawlek, Pawelec. And he had been involved in the development of the embeddable radio frequency chips.
Really?
Yeah, and he knew of their use in simulating alien abductions that were being done by the CIA and military. We'll get into this in a moment, how deep the deception goes. So we put this up. In a few days, it hit 675,000 views. And then overnight, we check, and the counter is down to 6,700. They went in and chopped off those numbers so it would take it out of the algorithms as a trending video.
I've seen it happen.
Yeah. And so people who think that doesn't happen, I just want to say, I got a bridge to sell you to nowhere or swampland to sell you because they're just simply naive. And this is another reason why we have to find creative strategies to do this, because the corporate, if you look at the major media, there's a handful of individuals and corporations that control all of it. And that becomes a problem when there's this collusion between these covert operations and corporate. Now, to give a little history lesson, late 1800s, early 20th century, something developed called fascism. Of course, now anyone that you disagree with, you call them a fascist. Mm-hmm. But the definition of fascism were large financial and corporate interests controlling government policy and what the government would do against the interests of the people. That's what fascism is. Go look it up. Thomas Jefferson warned of it. He actually wrote warned of the unchecked power of the corporations corrupting government. That's where we are, but on a massive scale globally. So that's happened with the media, it's happened with the government programs, and it's happened in other sectors, financial, what have you. So the interests of we, the people, have gotten run over by the interests of a relatively handful of extraordinarily powerful corporate and individuals.
How many people do you think are involved at that level?
There are 200 or 300 people on this committee, and one branch of it is called MAGIC, the Majority Intelligence Committee, MAJI, but committee is in MAGIC. Well, I have a document that lists it. So this is in my book, Unacknowledged. That document's in there. It's a secret document that I acquired and published. They can't punish me because I declared the project's illegal. A lot of people say, how have they not pursued you? I said, they can't. Because I had an FBI guy say, I said, let's put the handcuffs on right now and get on the dance floor. Because this is going to go to the, even if it goes in camera, it's going to go to a court, and I will be able to prove. Because what are we going to do? We're going to subpoena the CI director that I briefed. We're going to subpoena the senators I have briefed. We're going to subpoena the head of the Defense Intelligence. And all these people will have to tell the truth or lie under oath, that in fact they were left out. And so I said, I don't think you want a court case like that. Now, people say, man, this guy's a son of a bitch. Well, I'm sort of a fighter, and I'm not intimidated.